Questions and comments?
The Honourable Minister of State for Transport.
Yes, thank you. Mr. Speaker, can this member explain that how he's going to explain this to Atlantic Canada? What he's essentially saying is Atlantic Canada will lose 32 parliamentary positions, and an area that's already having many challenges. What the NDP is actually proposing is the status quo. Because the abolishment cannot happen, it would be much better if the NDP would adopt this government's plan for 9-year non-renewable terms and elections in the provinces. And only this government has said that they would do that. Provinces need to hold the elections. The Prime Minister will appoint who is elected. Those are things that can be done that bring meaningful change to the Senate, and the NDP opposes it. And by opposing it, you're actually supporting the status quo. How does the member respond to that?
The Honourable Member for Toronto-Danforth.
Well, I'd like to mention, Mr. Speaker, that before becoming a very privileged resident of Toronto-Danforth the last 23 years, I originally come from Nova Scotia. And I'm completely confident that Atlantic Canadians, no different from other Canadians, understand what the Senate really is, that it has no representative function for them. It does not play that role. That said, we have to listen to the provinces. Nova Scotia, New Brunswick, Prince Edward Island and the Maritimes and Newfoundland. We have to listen to what the provinces have to say through their own political processes. And if indeed they want the Senate to remain, we're going to have to listen. But I actually do not believe that that is the sentiment either politically or amongst the populace in Atlantic Canada. And it's consultation that will determine that, not running away from talking to the provinces, which is the mode of the Prime Minister.
Questions and comments?
Questions and comments. The Honourable Member for Saint-Laurent-Cartierville. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
My colleague to come with this motion, but the question is, why does he want, and his party wants, to divert a lot of the energy of our governments, of this federation, at a time where the economy is so shaky and people are concerned about their jobs, in order to reopen the Constitution, start a mega negotiation that will go nowhere because we know many provinces want to keep the Senate, and to spend a lot of money in a referendum that will fail because many provinces will say that they want to keep the Senate. So why to do all this at a time where all of our energy should focus on the economy and the difficult times in which we are?
The Honourable Member for Toronto-Danforth.
I appreciate the question, and I must say I respect greatly the Honourable Member who's posed it, the work he's done for Canada, and where this question comes from. But I have to say I profoundly disagree with the assumption that we know what Canadians and what provinces through their representatives think on this matter. Things have changed a lot of late. Canadians are sick and tired of dysfunctional parliamentary politics. They understand this House needs reform. They understand the electoral system needs reform, but they also understand the Senate is a useless institution. Coming from the province the member represents, through his own constituency, I'd like to say that he should not presume to know what the government of that province's position will be on the question of abolition. Things can change, for example. So let's just wait and see, and let's see what dialogue and talking to the provinces will result. If it turns out that abolition requires unanimous consent, his point will be well taken. It will be difficult. But if it's 750, it's going to be extremely possible to do. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Questions and comments? Question come on side. The Honourable Member for Toronto-Danforth.
Mr. Speaker, I was wondering if the Honourable Minister could respond to a couple of comments. The first of all is the House Leader's attempt to seek unanimous consent, and now the Minister's is an obvious stunt. I would just put that on the record. completely against the rule of law, even before going to committee with such an incredibly complex bill that is clearly unconstitutional and that the government itself wants clarification from the Supreme Court. He wants this House to unanimously consent to a bill before the Supreme Court has told us whether it's constitutional. He knows it can't be operationalized until we hear that. It's a stunt. In terms of opening the Constitution, they've done this without consulting the provinces. The bill they've put pretending that Parliament can pass this on its own is clearly unconstitutional. Just complete disregard for the rule of law. He's done it, not he, but the Prime Minister has done this as a cloak to be able to appoint, over the last 6 years, 58 senators. Now, this business about us wanting to appoint senators is complete nonsense. There's no need to appoint senators on the road to abolition. There can be vacancies in the House. They can be left open as we work towards abolition, and we will work with existing senators while making sure the entire Senate knows it is illegitimate to block the will of the House. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Questions and comments? I'm sorry. The Honourable Minister of State for Democratic Reform.
Mr. Speaker,
On this important topic.
what a real stunt is coming here with a motion, not a bill, but a motion to abolish the Senate when they know very, very well that the Constitution will not allow for this. They have no agreement from the provinces to do this, Mr. Speaker. We are the only party with an actual plan, a plan to work with the provinces. The Senate Reform Act that I was talking about, Mr. Speaker, not only would limit the terms of senators, but would actually work with the provinces, because it would be the provinces that would ask their the members of that province, the Canadians that live in that province, to elect the representatives, allow Canadians to have a say in who represents them in the Senate. That is how we are working with the provinces to create a better, a more democratic and accountable Senate, Mr. Speaker. And we have appointed at every opportunity elected senators, Mr. Speaker, 3 from Alberta that are currently in the Senate today.
Questions and comments? Questions and comments for Toronto-Danforth.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'd like to thank the honourable member for an extremely well done speech, very informative, and very well argued. At the same time, I would like to ask whether or not he's not just being a little bit defeatist in his clear understanding that it's impossible to abolish the Senate. It's ultimately, yes, in the hands of the provinces and the people of the provinces, but we owe it to Canadians to work with the provinces to try to persuade them, assisted by Canadians in their outrage about what the Senate now represents. Now, if the Supreme Court does say 750 is the formula, it does become possible. I grant that if it's unanimous consent, it becomes very difficult. 750, it's possible. As my colleague, the member for Vaudreuil-Soulanges in Quebec just reminded me, Jack Layton always reminded Canadians, quote, "Don't let them tell you it can't be done," unquote. And with that in mind, I would simply like to ask the member whether or not he's absolutely certain, for example, that Quebec would never support the idea of abolition.
Honourable member for Saint-Laurent-Cartierville.
To meet one Quebec politician who would say, "I'm ready to open the Constitution, the 1982 Constitution, only to fix the problem of the Senate." I think I never met one in the National Assembly of Quebec. So that's the answer of its first question. But I will ask to the NDP, because they have the full day to answer to this question, are they saying that they are ready to get rid of the original Veto Act? Because when they say it will be 750, what that means, that the original Veto Act will not exist anymore. They will, this House and the Senate will get rid of it. If it's their plan, they should say that, because I think it will create a big flag.